Let's talk about Warzone a little bit, right? This is obviously a major conversation as I've been kind of scrolling through Twitter. Obviously, a lot more free time now that I'm at home. But YouTube, Twitch, pretty much all the socials, and I've just been seeing Warzone constantly, as I'm sure that you have as well. Kind of throughout your quarantine process, Warzone has been the game that I've personally been playing a lot, and I've almost kind of identified Modern Warfare as Warzone. Like I'm like, hey, you guys want to hop on Warzone rather than Modern Warfare? It's just kind of a common term. But the conversation that I want to bring up is Warzone hurting competitive Call of Duty, right? The world is actually playing Warzone right now. If you haven't already seen the stats, in just 10 days, Warzone has reached over 30 million players worldwide. That's crazy. In 10 days, reached over 30 million players worldwide. And the thing is that the game hasn't left the top of Twitch. The game hasn't left the top games on streaming platforms. This game is taking over in the midst of the opportunity that it's kind of presented for itself, which is the fact that everyone's at home now due to COVID-19. Everybody's at home. Everyone's playing games. And the reason why I believe this game is having so much success is not just because of that, but also because it's a great game, right? It is the go-to battle royale, and it looks as well that it could last for a while. I do follow a few different battle royale analysts and commentators and just kind of people who kind of exist in that scene, and they're like, there's some depth with this game, right? There could be a future when it comes down to Warzone. Now, I don't know about competitive. I don't know about all of those things, but just in general, from a strictly player base, the numbers, they're interesting, they're intriguing, and it's something to be conscious about. But from a Call of Duty competitive standpoint, is it something to worry about? Right? The question remains, not only could Warzone be hurting competitive Call of Duty, but rather could BRs in COD hurt it for the future? And I realize, as I mentioned just a few moments ago, I realize that I stem more toward the competitive side in terms of Call of Duty, which is a lower percent of the COD audience. But I hope Blackout, I hope Warzone, especially, puts the realization of Call of Duty that this needs to take precedence over single player. And you have to be careful, because if Activision Blizzard start focusing more on battle royales, they focus more on content that could take away from competitive in the future, because by many opinions, competitive was not the main focus this season in Modern Warfare. Now, I'm partial to relying on what I believe to be true, which is pretty much the idea that Infinity Ward had franchising thrown in their lap. I think that, at least in my particular opinion, the way that franchising came about, which was pretty much last second from a lot of different people's perspectives, I think that Infinity Ward was not expecting this whatsoever. I think from a competitive standpoint, we talked about obviously a number of different things when it comes down to just competitive playlists, etc. They weren't prepared for this. I mean, they weren't. It doesn't. It's like there have been so many different situations of which you could look at how things were done last second, or how things weren't done properly, or how efficiently, whatever you want to kind of label it as. There were a lot of different situations where things have changed last minute, and so I don't believe that Infinity Ward necessarily. I don't know if this title should be an accurate indicator for the future of Call of Duty franchising whatsoever, right? Because I don't think that Infinity Ward, the developer of Modern Warfare, were prepared to have their focus change in some aspects to competitive, right? I believe with Treyarch right around the corner, and for a second go of it with franchising now at the helm, BRs will take the focus away from the Call of Duty League. Like I said, from the way that I look at Treyarch as a developer, I think that they have the kind of notes taken on what has existed for this year. I think they've gone to the drawing board. I think they've looked at what has kind of taken place throughout this competitive season, even obviously from a public standpoint, and they realize the circumstances. They realize, okay, these are the do's and these are the don'ts. These are the things that we want to make sure that we accomplish. These are the things that we need to take away. And that, kind of is an unfortunate thing for competitive in the inaugural season of the CDL with obviously COVID-19, but also at the same time, arguably a game developer not being super prepared. But with how quick this year was done, I don't believe this to be a full accurate representation of what we can expect for the future. Format even decided last second, and obviously, for the better, changes of things. It didn't allow for teams, to be at events. When we talk about it, the format was decided literally maybe a few weeks before the first event took place, and I'm glad that it did. But that is just one of the many indicators that goes to show that this year was kind of a fast one, right? And this was a curveball thrown at Infinity Ward. They weren't ready, and they weren't 100% kind of all there, I think, in a majority of different circumstances. That's the way that I look at it. That's the way that I'm kind of looking, at least as of right now, in the current circumstances that we're in, because like I said, I don't think this should be a year that we look at it and look back and say, okay, that's what we can expect, because I think Warzone actually really isn't that bad, right? And I know that currently COVID-19, in terms of the way that, the championship conversation is going to work for the future, will allow, honestly, for this season of the CDL to be considered more of a trial run. Warzone, with the hype that it's getting, obviously the CDL right now in its current kind of unfortunate state, all things considered, it is unfortunate. But with the fastness of if you will, of this year, the way that things have translated now, obviously with the online league beginning to come a thing, I believe that this year will kind of be looked upon as like, oh yeah, the first year. Oh yeah, that 1 year, the championship conversation, it was the first year. It was the inaugural season, big deal. It doesn't count as a regular major LAN of years previous, which could be a good thing or a bad thing for Call of Duty historians out there. Probably a little bit more of a negative thing, like myself. I'm going to be pulling my hair out trying to figure out, okay, does this championship count as a whole lot? Does this championship not count as a whole lot? Do online major championships count? There's a lot of conversations to obviously happen later on. But I want to talk about a few positives personally as we kind of wind down here a little bit. On our current second subject, a few positives, right, for me in terms of Warzone, the way that it affects the competitive Call of Duty scene, because I've seen a few people talk about it, kind of express their worries for how this kind of progression is going to take place, because Warzone in some ways does help highlight the CDL. And as minuscule as it may be, imagine if the CDL was up and running as it was intended to. Right? Imagine the stream numbers. Imagine the hype that would be going right now if you had Warzone to watch at the same time as you had competitive Call of Duty to watch. And I realize maybe people could argue and say, oh, well, the numbers, they're taking away, from the general audience. They're taking away, from what could be the numbers that the CDL events could get. And obviously it's a different mode, but Call of Duty reaching incredible numbers on vast streaming platforms nonetheless is a plus, right? It's a plus regardless. The name Modern Warfare, Call of Duty, is seeing those numbers. It's being talked about consistently. It's being streamed by some of the biggest personalities in the world right now. And the name Call of Duty is continuing to generate day after day after day. I don't know. For me, I look at this as a plus more than anything. I think it's keeping the game, and I think it's keeping the title relevant. And even in these big tournaments, and we've obviously seen them be brought out. I think there was one playing a little bit earlier today. Pro players are involved in these, right? Pro players are being involved in multiple tournaments. And while you have to be careful about the ability for multiplayer lobbies to be replaced, I think that this nonetheless is a positive thing. You have to be careful about the ability, and you have to be worried about, in some cases, multiplayer lobbies to be replaced by a more popular mode in battle royales. But nonetheless, I think this is a positive thing. I think this is a good thing for competitive Call of Duty to be aware of. And nobody knows exactly as well how long the battle royale trend is going to last. Like I said, who knows how long this is going to take place for, and what competitive Call of Duty's future is at this current moment. Because single player could eventually get kind of thrown out the door for something like these extra modes, kind of like what Warzone provides. And I don't know if that's going to take place. But while not a perfect advertisement for the CDL, Warzone for me will be here to stay in terms of battle royales for the future. Battle royales, I think, are here to stay and are an indirect way of keeping Call of Duty Modern Warfare in the conversation and in the relevant eye of the community.